Okay, so you know how everyone's always talking about ancient wellness stuff? Like, oh, eat this way or move your body this way.
Right, right.
But have you ever really stopped to think about some of the less talked about practices they might have done back then? I mean, like, what if I told you they used to inhale herbal fumes on purpose for their health?
Now that's an image, isn't it? Inhaling smoke for wellness. But you know what's even more fascinating? That idea isn't just some ancient history. It's still around today. And
Exactly.
that's what we're going to get into today.
Yeah. We're going deep into Dhupan, which is this ancient Ayurvedic therapy that revolves around, yep, you guessed it, herbal fumigation.
Basically, using smoke from specific plants for healing.
Totally. And we're basing this whole deep dive on some really detailed looks at classical Ayurvedic texts.
Real foundational stuff.
Yeah. So our main source is this paper called, get ready for it, Dhupan, Therapeutics of Herbal Fumigation in Ayurvedic Texts.
Catchy title.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But it really dives deep into these super important writings like the Kashyap Samhita, the Charak Samhita, Sushrut Samhita, Bhaishajya Ratnavali, and the Yogratnakar.
Yeah, we're talking the heavy hitters of Ayurvedic literature. And you know, it's wild. These texts, they're packed with all sorts of ways Dhupan was used, like a whole bunch of different applications.
So basically, by the end of this, you're going to have a super solid understanding of how these well-respected ancient texts viewed and used herbal fumes.
For everything. We're talking treating illnesses, keeping people healthy, you name it.
It's this whole comprehensive approach to health that's literally been around for thousands of years.
It's mind-blowing.
Right. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Ancient texts in smoke sounds a little intense.
A little intimidating, maybe?
Yeah, a little intimidating. Don't worry, we're going to break it all down, make it super easy to follow.
No Sanskrit dictionaries required.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Plus, we're going to uncover some surprising insights into how they viewed wellness back then.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to focus on the most interesting and the most relevant stuff.
No need to get bogged down in the super technical details.
So first things first, what exactly is Dhupan? Like, how do we even define this thing?
Okay, so to understand Dhupan, you got to know it's different from some other practices that sound kind of similar. Like, you might have heard of Dhum Nasya, right?
Yeah, Nasya rings a bell.
So that one specifically refers to inhaling herbal fumes through your nose.
Ah,
Then there's Dhumpana, where you inhale through your nose or mouth, but you only exhale through your mouth.
got it. So is Dhupan like the umbrella term for all of this?
You got it. Dhupan, it's the big picture. It's the whole therapeutic use of herbal fumes, period.
Okay.
So it includes inhaling the smoke, but it also includes just being around these fumes, like being in a room where they're present.
Interesting.
It's a much broader approach.
So it's not just about like a quick sniff of something. Okay, so what were the main reasons, like big picture, why these ancient texts talk about Dhupan? What were they trying to achieve with it?
Well, they use it for a ton of stuff, honestly. It's
Yeah.
pretty amazing how many applications they found for it.
Really?
Yeah, like across the board, they mentioned Dhupan for treating diseases directly, of course.
Right. Makes sense.
But get this, they were also really big on using it to prevent illness in the first place and just to maintain good health overall. It wasn't just about fixing you when you were sick, it was about staying well.
That's really interesting.
It is. It shows you they had this super proactive approach to health. Like, don't just wait for things to go wrong. Use these practices to keep yourself in tip-top shape.
Yeah, preventative health is not just a modern concept, right?
Not at all. And beyond that, you know, they highlight its use for mental health as well.
Oh, wow.
Which is fascinating, right? This wasn't just about your physical body. They were thinking about the whole person. They also talk about using it for fevers and even for helping kids grow up healthy.
So like a holistic system.
Totally. And then on top of that, they mention specific uses for problems with ears, eyes, teeth. Like, you name it, they probably had a Dhupan solution for it.
So it wasn't just about individual health either, was it? Like I remember reading something about how they use it for environmental benefits too.
Oh, yes, spot on. They talk about Dhupan being used for getting rid of pests like bugs, and also for purifying the air, cleaning up the space around them.
So double duty, helping people and the environment at the same time.
Exactly, hitting two birds with one stone.
Okay, so let's get into some of the specifics now. Our source really highlights the Kashyap Samhita. What's so special about how this particular text approaches Dhupan?
Well, the thing that really jumps out is that the Kashyap Samhita, it dedicates a whole chapter to Dhupan.
Wow, a whole chapter.
Yeah, the whole thing is called Dhupkalp Atyai. Like, they were serious about this stuff.
That's wild, a whole chapter just on herbal smoke.
Yeah.
That definitely shows you how important they thought it was.
I know, kidding.
So what kind of specific formulas and health benefits did they lay out in that chapter?
Okay, so our source has this handy table, table 1, and it breaks down a bunch of these Dhupan recipes.
Perfect.
It starts with this concept of Ragnashana,
Radnishada.
which basically means destroying disease. It's like a whole category.
Oh,
They say there are 40 different Dhupan preparations that have specific results for treating diseases.
40. That's a lot of smoke therapies.
Right. It's like a whole ancient pharmacy of fumes.
What were some of these specific dupes? Like, what were they made of and what were they supposed to do?
Okay, so there's one called Sarvarjagabaha, which is also known as Gandup. And the ingredients, they're pretty interesting. You've got ghee, rice, jasmine flower, honey, white mustard, and sweet flag. And they use this one for, get this, destroying all kinds of diseases.
Wow.
Even what they called bootrog, which literally translates to hanana. And that could mean anything from infectious diseases to spirit possession or even certain mental imbalances.
Jasmine and mustard, that's a combo you don't see every day.
Not exactly your typical aromatherapy blend.
What's another one that stands out to you?
Okay, so the Dupolia marishtam, also called Arista dupe, this one's pretty hardcore. Just 2 ingredients, ghee, and all 5 parts of the neem tree.
All 5, like the leaves, the bark, everything.
Everything. Leaves, roots, flowers, fruits, bark, the whole shebang. And they said this one could bring you to a disease-free state immediately.
Powerful stuff. I mean, neem is still highly valued in Ayurveda, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's like a superstar of Ayurvedic herbs.
What about a Dhupan for just general well-being, like something to keep you healthy?
They had one for that too. It's called Sukhavaha, which basically means health tonic.
Catchy?
And for this one, they use ghee, gakru, also known as Tribulus terrestris, Malabar nut flour, turmeric, daruhaldi, which is Berberis aristata, cocoa grass, sweet flag, and glory flower. Quite a mix.
Yeah, quite a mix. I definitely recognize turmeric in that.
Oh yeah, turmeric's classic.
Now, there's one that sounds particularly relevant today. Sarvarogagrapaha, or Shishuk dupe. And this one's interesting because it's meant to target both diseases and mental illness. What's in that one?
This one has a lot going on. It's ghee, stoniac, jadamansi, tagar, cocoa grass, hauber, which is Juniperus communis, fennel, hartal, also known as Terminalia tubula, sulfide of arsenic, cypertol, vitex seeds, and green cardamomum.
Sulfide of arsenic, huh? That's a strong one.
Yeah, some of these ingredients are definitely not your everyday herbs.
It really shows you how different their approach was compared to what we do today.
Yeah, different world, different remedies.
Were there any Dhupan formulas that were specific to certain seasons?
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's the Shakuni, Pundrik, Ravati, and Shalishmik Ragnivarak, which is also called Varun dupe. It's specifically for treating those conditions which were believed to be more common in the summer. So it's like a summer blend.
Interesting.
And the ingredients for this one are the resin of the longleaf pine tree, laksha, Himalayan wild cherry, sandalwood, devdar, holy basil, and shao.
So pine resin and sandalwood for those summer ailments. I can almost smell it now.
Yeah, very evocative, isn't it?
And what about the one that was supposed to help kids grow, the Vardiyati Praja, or Kumar dupe?
All right, get ready, because this one has a long list of ingredients. Ghee, ral, suranjan, marking nut tree, benzoin, haridra, daruhaldi, lak, vetiver, mustard, holy basil flower, vidang, jasmine, tejpatra, sweet flag, asafoetida, and nitrabella.
Whoa, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, and the fact that they combined so many different plants for this one, it really suggests that they put a lot of thought into creating a formula that would nourish and support kids as they grew.
You can really see the complexity of their approach.
For sure.
Okay, and lastly, the Sarvaragesh Epasmar Visheshan, also called Dashan dupe. This one was for all diseases, but especially epilepsy and mental illness, right?
Yep, that's one. And its ingredients are ghee, white mustard, costus, marking nut tree, sweet flag, basilamani, jasmine, Himalayan birch, and Indian myrrh.
Indian myrrh, which is also known as Google, right?
Exactly, Google. And it's interesting because we're going to see Google pop up again in other formulas for different purposes.
Oh, okay. So the Kashyap Samhita, it really seems to have laid out this detailed, almost systematic framework for Dhupan. But what about some of the other major Ayurvedic texts, like the Charak Samhita and the Sushrut Samhita? Did they also talk about this?
Oh, absolutely, they did.
Okay, good. I was hoping they would.
Yeah, so while the Kashyap Samhita, has that whole chapter dedicated to Dhupan, the Charak Samhita and the Sushrut Samhita also mention using it for various health benefits, although maybe not in the same super organized way.
Gotcha. So what are some of the key uses they highlighted?
Well, one of the big ones is treating epilepsy. The Charak Samhita describes the specific Palakshashadi oil preparation that has this huge list of ingredients, all herbs.
Okay.
And the important thing is that they recommend doing Dhupan with those same herbs at the same time as you're doing the oil massage for epilepsy. So it's like a combo treatment.
Interesting. So it's not just DuPont on its own, it's integrated into a broader approach.
That's exactly.
What else did they focus on?
Managing fevers was another big one. The Charak Samhita talks about using Dhupan for both chronic fevers and acute fevers that have some kind of external cause.
So inhaling fumes to treat a fever. That's definitely not what we think of today when we think about fevers.
No, very different approach.
What about stuff with the eyes and the ears? Did they mention anything about that?
Oh, yeah. For eye disorders, the Sushrut Samhita recommends this procedure where you use softened barley first, then you do a nasal cleansing with Shuravir Chana, and then you do Dhupan.
Wow, that's a whole process.
Yeah, multiple steps. And then for ear problems, they specifically say that Dhupan with Google is considered the most effective treatment.
There's that Google again.
Right, it keeps coming up. And they often use Dhupan with Google alongside other treatments like Vaman, which is therapeutic vomiting, Dhoopan, which we talked about earlier, and gargling. So a real multi-pronged approach.
Google seems like it was a pretty key ingredient.
Yeah, super versatile.
Now, we also looked at the Bhaishajya Ratnavali and the Yogratnakar, right? What did those texts add to our understanding of Dhupan?
So those texts, they came a little later in the Ayurvedic tradition, and they also get into Dhupan for a bunch of different reasons. Often they're expanding on what the earlier text said or giving us new formulas for the same conditions.
Got it. So can you give some specific examples of how they used Dhupan?
For sure. So for treating mania, specifically what they called agantik unvad, which means insanity caused by something outside of the person, the Bhaishajya Ratnavali, it says you got to do a whole lot more than just herbs.
Like what?
They talk about mantra tantra, worship, offerings, yagya, japa, hawan, and even applying things topically like ointments and nasha.
So it's more of a spiritual approach
Uh-huh.
combined with physical treatment.
Exactly.
What about other mental health issues? Did they have anything to say about those?
Oh yeah, both the Bhaishajya Ratnavali and the Yogratnakar have this really intense Dhupan formula for that. They say to take equal parts of, ready for this, cotton seeds, mare pitch, all 5 parts of the African eggplant, Savannah maya, black palm, vetiver, bamboo manna, orchid tree, rice bran, sweet flag, jatamansi, nirmak, gum arabic tree, Indian rose chestnut, asafoetida, and black pepper.
Wow. That's a whole lot of ingredients, and I don't recognize half of them.
Right. It's a pretty wild mix. But they said this one was good for treating a bunch of different mental illnesses like Skandapsmar, Pishachanmad, Rakshasanmad, and Divideshanmad, and also fevers, surprisingly.
It's really amazing the depth of knowledge they had about plants back then.
Oh, totally.
Did they use Dhupan for anything more practical, like getting
No.
rid of bugs or something?
Oh, yeah, definitely. The Yogratnakar has this formula called Krimina Shak Dhup, which is basically a bug-killing Dhupan.
Okay.
And for this one, they use 8 different herbs. You've got flowers of arjun, vaibirang, pure poison of flame lily, pure marking nut tree, vetiver, frankincense, rayal, Indian sandalwood, and costus.
So like a natural insecticide.
Exactly. And they said it was good for all sorts of bugs, bed bugs, nits, head lice, you name it.
Wow. And I remember reading about using Dhupan for treating tooth infections. That one seemed a little strange to me, using smoke for your teeth.
Yeah, that one's pretty out there.
What was that all about?
So the Yogratnakar describes this method where you take ripe colocynth and you heat it up with red-hot iron.
Ouch.
And then you direct the fumes from that towards the infected tooth to treat what they call toothworms.
Okay, so definitely not your typical dental care.
No, not at all.
This all brings up a really interesting point, though. When we're talking about these ancient texts, translation and interpretation, that's got to be super important,
That
right?
for sure. Like, how do we even know we're understanding these things correctly?
And our source actually digs into this whole issue, right?
Yeah, it does.
What does it say about that?
So the author brings up these questions about how some of the Sanskrit terms in these classic texts, they've been translated to literally. Like, they've been translated as non-herbal ingredients when maybe they should have been interpreted as herbs all along.
Interesting.
And the author, they suggest some alternative herbal interpretations based on their understanding of Sanskrit and how they actually prepared medicines back in the day.
So what are some of these terms that might have been mistranslated? And what are the author's herbal alternatives?
Okay, so for example, there's this term baslamani.
Baslamani.
Yeah, and it's often been translated as hair of goat, but the author, they're like, hold on a second. Loma in Sanskrit can also refer to the dendrites of plants, and basti is actually a name for several different plants.
So maybe it's not goat hair after all.
Right, and then there's mashaminam, which has been translated as tongue of the carnivorous bird, but the problem is they don't say which bird.
Yeah, that's important.
Right, like how are you supposed to know what bird they're talking about?
Exactly.
And that could totally change the formula.
For sure.
So the author suggests that mashaminam actually refers to a specific herb that has a tongue-like shape.
So it's more about the appearance of the plant than an actual animal part.
Exactly. It's like they're naming plants based on what they look like. And then there's bastmuture, which is usually translated as urine of goat. This one's a little tricky.
Urine of goat. Okay.
Yeah, but the author points out that muter in Sanskrit, it can also mean wine or some other fermented liquid. And like we said before, basti is a name for a bunch of different plants.
Interesting.
So basmuter could actually be talking about some kind of fermented drink made from plants.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense.
Right. And then you've got vidal, which is translated as feces of animal vidal. But again, they don't say what kind of animal.
So non-specific.
Totally vague. And the author suggests that vidal might actually be referring to the gum of the orchid tree, since vidal is also a Sanskrit word for that plant.
Which makes way more sense in the context of these formulas.
Right. Like plant gum, that fits in with the other ingredients. Animal poop, not so much.
Definitely not. What about Gauchring and Deviptant?
So Gauchring is often translated as cow's horn, but the author says it could actually be the gum arabic tree.
Okay.
And deviptant, which is usually translated as ivory, from elephant tusks, the author thinks that might actually mean the seed of the Indian rose chestnut.
Interesting.
Yeah, so basically the author's argument is that all these ingredients that have been interpreted as coming from animals, they might actually be plants all along.
That's a pretty big shift in how we understand these formulas.
It is.
What's the author's reasoning for that?
Okay, so there are a few different reasons. First, Sanskrit words can have multiple meanings, so there's that.
Right.
But also, think about it practically. If they were using really hard things like ivory, how would they even grind it up into a powder without specific tools? And the texts don't mention any special tools for that.
Good point.
And another thing, it seems weird that they just throw these animal ingredients into formulas that are mostly plants without even explaining the difference.
Yeah, it's not very organized.
Not at all. Plus, the rishis, the ancient sages who wrote these texts, they were all about living in harmony with nature.
Right.
So it kind of makes sense that they'd prefer plant-based remedies over animal-based ones. And practically speaking, plant ingredients would have been way easier to find and store than animal parts. So there's that too.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just more logical. And then there's the fact that some Sanskrit plant names are symbolic. They're not literal descriptions. So that tells us we need to think beyond just the straight translation of the word and consider the bigger picture, the context.
Absolutely.
It's super fascinating to think about how our understanding of these ancient practices is still evolving. And who knows, maybe there are other ingredients that we're misunderstanding too.
Yeah, we might still be uncovering new knowledge about this stuff.
Exactly.
So to bring this back to today, does Dhupan have any relevance in the modern world? Like, is it just an ancient practice, or is there something there for us now?
So this is where it gets really interesting. The paper we're looking at points out that there's actually some modern research on herbal smoke inhalation.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. It's through something called Yagya, which is a Vedic practice that's kind of similar to Dhupan.
Yeah.
And these studies have found that when you inhale herbal smoke, the active compounds in the plants, they can actually be absorbed really effectively by your lungs.
So it's not just hocus pocus.
No, not at all. There's some real science behind it. So it's like this cool connection between ancient wisdom and modern science.
It's really cool. So what would you say is the big takeaway from this whole deep dive into Dhupan?
The main thing to remember is that Dhupan, as it's described in these ancient texts, it was a really sophisticated system of healing that used herbal fumes for all sorts of health problems.
Okay.
We're talking specific diseases, mental health issues, helping kids grow, even purifying the environment. It wasn't just one simple thing. They had a whole bunch of different techniques and specific herbal blends for different purposes.
It's more than just lighting some incense.
Oh, yeah, way more. And the whole debate about how to interpret some of the ingredients, that just makes it even more intriguing, don't you think?
Definitely. Like we're still figuring this stuff out. It shows you that there's so much more to learn about these ancient traditions.
Absolutely. And if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, we definitely encourage you to check out the paper we've been talking about. Or do some more research on Ayurveda and herbal medicine in general.
It has for me. It makes you wonder, could we rediscover some amazing new ways to improve our health and well-being today by looking back at these ancient practices like Dhupan?
Mm.
Like, what if there are all these powerful remedies hidden in plain sight, just waiting for us to rediscover them? This is
Yeah.
definitely something to think about.
Food for thought, for sure.
Definitely.